Illinois Chamber, and most importantly, your support for your Chamber of Commerce. I think you all know this. The Joliet Area Chamber is one of the very, very best chambers of commerce across the state of Illinois. I see an awful lot of chambers, and I like them all, but some we like even better. And here in Joliet, you've got a great program. Mike is a great advocate because not only are you involved in your community, you're a chamber that understands that Springfield impacts what happens in your community, and to a certain extent as well, what Washington does, and your partnership with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And that's what I think really makes the Chamber Federation really, really unique, is that we all work together, representing the diversity of the business community, and we're as concerned about national issues as we are about state issues, and we are about community issues. So thank you all very, very much for being engaged and such. Mike, Mayor, thank you for coming as well. Harris, thanks for hosting us. They're great members of ours as well. I think I saw Pete sneak in back there, give a little shout out there as well. And then, as you all know, John Grueling is the rock star of economic development in the state of Illinois. So hopefully I didn't leave anybody out. I'd like to mention everybody, but you're all very, very valued in your contributions to your chamber, to the community, and then what we do at the Illinois Chamber of Commerce as well. So what you're going to discover today is that I can talk kind of fast because Mike has talked about a few issues that are priorities that your chamber has identified. And I want to go ahead and give you at least an overview of where I see those issues stand. As you know, at the beginning of January, a lot of issues were very much on the front end, but I'll give you a sense of where I think we stand and where they may go. But clearly by March, April, May, you have a lot better feel for what's actually going to happen. And then I'm going to devote most of my time to, if you hadn't figured it out, a discussion about the proposed constitutional amendment that would change Illinois' income tax structure from a flat tax to a progressive tax. A lot of people call it the graduated tax as well. Not surprisingly, we've done polling and say that people like the term progressive less than they like graduated, so we're using progressive. Let me go ahead and talk about some of the things that we know that people in this room have identified as priorities for the year. So let me go ahead and start with, I think, a combination, is that as we go into a legislative session, and yes, there was the first 2 days of legislative session this week, the governor gave his State of the State address, a lot of review of what they did last year, and if you support the governor, you like a lot of what he did. He actually, and I always say this, that last session, 2019, was a tale of two sessions. First of all, frankly, the business community got beat up pretty good at the beginning. Minimum wage increase, $15 statewide, and I'll tell you that we had real traction with Republicans and Democrats who are saying, okay, maybe there's going to be a minimum wage increase, but let's do it on a regionalized basis, because wages for making lattes in the Loop probably are $16, $17, $18 an hour. Here in Will County, they come down. In Mattoon, Illinois, they're even farther down. We were getting real traction on regionalization of the minimum wage, and then the governor just shut it down. I think the SEIU got to him and he said, nope, $15 everywhere. So what we've got is some legislation that we still will mitigate the damage by creating a new tax credit for smaller and medium-sized businesses that will be tied to federal wage data. So that, we all know that the U.S. Department of Labor has wage data on communities or regions, and the lower that wage level is, what's competitive wage rates, we're going to go ahead and give you a bigger tax credit based on where you are. So yeah, if you own a Starbucks in the Loop, guess what? Your tax credit is going to be pretty close to zero. Down here, it's going to be some more. Farther in other less competitive parts of the state, it's going to be even more. So that's not an answer to a $15 minimum wage, which we think is going to be very, very burdensome, but it's a partial offset, and we're going to be pursuing that. The other small business issue I want to go ahead and talk about is, this is my favorite bill for a long time. Came from a member. But small businesses in particular were left out of the positive things that happened at the end of session. The positive things that happened at the end of the 2019 session, franchise tax, data center initiatives, which was our initiative, we're very happy to happen, research and development tax credit, all those things were great, but they were skewed towards our larger businesses. Small businesses were left with a minimum wage increase and the prospect of a progressive income tax that's going to punish entrepreneurs and small businesses. So what we want to go ahead and do is to have an idea, hopefully multiple ideas, and if you have ideas, please bring them to us. The best one I've heard so far is what we call almost a 529 plan for small business capital investment. So I'm saving for my kids' college right now, and we're using a 529 plan. Allows you to save up year after year after year, tax-free, and as long as you spend it on college expenses, then you don't pay a penalty, you get to save it tax-free. We think if you've got a plant and you know you've got a $200,000 roof you're going to put on your plant 3 years down the road, we want you to be able to go ahead and start saving for that today, tax-free, so that you can go ahead and either not have to go to the bank or not take a huge hit on your revenues in 1 year. So that's our best idea on small businesses. We're getting some traction. Democrats will introduce that measure in both the House and the Senate. So it's bipartisan. We'll see if we can go ahead and get that done. But small business focus is very important. We want to talk about it. The big headline that I saw out of media from yesterday's speech by the governor of the state was ethics reform. That's not too surprising, given when you have somebody pleading guilty the day before. State Senator Sandoval, believe it or not, was at least a really good transportation advocate. I have no idea what else he was doing other than being a transportation advocate. But I will tell you that I think that the biggest thing I'd be concerned about for the business community is, number one, is it real reforms? Are we really going to do things that make sure that penalties are enhanced so that our elected officials, if they want to stray, they think twice? Is it going to be real reform? But here's the other thing. Is it going to be an opportunity for the elected officials or public officials to decide, you know what, we don't like being out here by ourselves. So what we're going to do is extend all sorts of new requirements onto the private sector. All of you may have some kind of new regulations in order to engage in discussion with your elected officials, in order to be part of the public discourse, in order to go ahead and lobby. Because I will tell you that I'm very concerned because we already have an example from just last year. Remember, this time last year, the whole discussion was about Me Too and a culture of insensitivity, bad behavior, whatever you want to call it, under the State House dome with lobbyists, but legislators in particular. If you remember that, there was the letter that all sorts of people signed on to that said the culture is unacceptable, and it was very much about government not regulating itself adequately at the State House. And there was, I don't know, I'm at home by 5:30, so I didn't see a whole lot of it, but I trust people. If they say it was bad behavior, there's bad behavior problem. But what started out as a State House problem quickly became a private sector problem, and all sorts of new regulations came down on all of us in the private sector because government wasn't implementing best practices. The laws in the private sector and implementation in the private sector, they're always bad actors, but in the private sector, we were doing things right. And we got dragged into more regulations, so you have to do mandatory training. If you're in the hospitality industry, and we're in the hospitality industry, you've got to do especially even more training because legislators behaved badly. So I'm a little afraid that the ethics is going to be the same thing. Legislators like to have company. Now it's about private sector as well as bad behaving elected officials. So I'm a little concerned about that on the ethics front. So I know we also want to talk about education and property taxes as well. I'm going to go ahead and try and incorporate that into the discussion here, if that's okay. And then finally, I'll want to talk about pensions. And that kind of comes into context with our discussion about the graduated tax as well. Talked to the mayor just briefly at lunch. We have signed on to the Municipal League's program for changes to pension systems in Illinois that will reduce the burden on local taxpayers and really make the system more sustainable. And I've publicly given the governor a lot of credit for taking the first relatively small step, but important first step, in allowing consolidation of all of the assets, the management of the assets for both, I think, fire and the police to be consolidated, so you're going to get better returns. And it's not going to be 700, 800 different funds that are going to be managed. It's going to be two, very professionally managed if it works well, and you're going to get better rates of return. So that doesn't solve the local pension problem, but it's at least a step in the right direction. So the chamber is very supportive of that. We think Brad and the Municipal League is doing a great job with that. We just need more. What's the next step? What's the next step? So local pensions are very, very important, as well as the state pensions, which you'll see up here is up to $138 billion that all of us owe to get the pensions up to where they should be funded. So pension reform, you cannot have a discussion about the state finances, taxation policy without talking about pensions. Local governments have been left behind, I think, a little bit. Unfortunately, everybody's focused on that $138 billion at the statewide level. Well, guess what? It's huge at the local level as well, and that's where your property taxes get hit. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hope that my clicker, I know how to use it. All right, so. Okay, so we did some polling on the constitutional amendment. We are working closely with the Farm Bureau and other entities that you're going to know on a household basis, depending on what your profession is. So we want to get together and work collectively to make the discussion. So this isn't just about a narrative about making the wealthy pay. Nobody in Joliet's going to get a tax increase. It's just the really, really rich guys on LaSalle Street. That's not the case. We did some polling, and the first thing that came out of our poll with the Farm Bureau was that only 25% of Illinoisans even know what the constitutional amendment is. So Pritzker talks about it a lot. He made it the centerpiece of his election campaign. He talks about it all the time. Every time fiscal problems come up in a discussion, he says, we've got to go to a progressive tax. Only 1 in 4 Illinoisans even know what that is, or know that it's going to be on the ballot this November. So when we pulled this together, we decided, well, we've got to tell people what this thing really is. And it is a change to the Constitution that we will all vote on in November. I get 60% of the votes. But it's going to substantially change the way income taxes are levied across the state. And why should you care? Because right now you pay at a flat rate. We think that's the true fair tax, and you'll see a slide later that talks about, the richest quintile and the smallest, or the lowest quintile in terms of income, the richest actually pays a little bit more than they should in income, and the lowest actually pays a little bit less. But it works really, really exactly how it's intended to, which is you pay the proportion of taxes that is exactly equivalent to your income on a statewide basis. So everybody can be impacted by this, and we'll drill down on that tomorrow. Okay.
Which one? Okay, good. Okay, so the important thing, I'll just come out here, this will be a little easier, I think. So how are you being taxed today? We talked about it. It's a flat tax. It's constitutionally mandated. There are things that are in place that actually do graduate a little bit in structure. For instance, there are things like the earned income tax credit that help lower income folks actually get checks from the state. But there are also things, there are other tax credits everybody gets, except when you get it to a certain income level, those tax credits go away. So while it's a flat rate, the structure is actually somewhat graduated as it stands now. But the rate, the ability to maintain that standard rate is really, really important for what we say. And I'll tell you what's on this. Okay. Oh. Yeah, it's fair and stable, 4.9%. We believe the flat tax is the fair tax. So one of the first things you're going to hear about the proponents of the graduated tax will say, Illinois is out of the mainstream. That we're one of only a few states that have a flat tax. Everybody graduates their tax, and we're just trying to get back in the mainstream. Not the case. So look, if you total up these states, these are the states that have no income tax whatsoever. So 9 states that have a flat tax like us, another 9. And then here's the category that we think we've got to talk about increasingly. The other side wants to talk and say that, you know what, Virginia has a graduated income tax and wants to count that as somebody who's doing something different than we are. Well, the maximum tax rate kicks in at $17,000. So if your narrative is that we're just going to go ahead and tax the wealthy, soak the rich, whatever you prefer, are you going to tell me that $17,000 is the wealthy? That's where the maximum rate goes up. So we've pegged it at $25,000. These are the states that have the maximum rate of $25,000. Even at $30,000, you get another 3 states. But these 3 categories themselves all add up to 28 states. If we were to jack this, talk about even 40,000, you're getting well into the 30s in terms of states that have no income tax, a flat tax, or an effective tax. My guess is that the proponents are going to abandon this argument pretty quickly because it's really pretty easy to demonstrate that it is not the case. So here's the other thing you need to know about. Not only does Illinois taxpayers, are they protected by the flat rate, there are 2 other protections that are currently in the Constitution that this amendment will either eliminate or gut. The first is that the state can only levy 1 tax based on income. So imagine that dollar of income you've got. You may think they tax it too much, too little, but they got 1 shot at taxing that dollar of income. What this amendment will allow is that they can come back and say, you know what, that was an income tax increase in 2021, but what we really need also is a public safety surcharge, or we need a pension obligation supplement. So really this is a way to open the door to all sorts of additional income taxes that are called things other than an income tax increase. So this is really, really important. There's some sense, some people have argued to me that opens the door to local income taxes as well. That's in dispute, but that is a wrinkle to be discussed. The other thing is that Illinois currently has a cap on how much corporations can be taxed versus individuals. So originally, that cap was done away with. It's called the 6-to-5 ratio. Essentially, corporate taxes can't be any more than 60% more than individual rates. It was a deal that was cut back in 1970 between pro-business representatives and others who like to tax, so it was a compromise. That was modified, though, that when you, if the 8-to-5 ratio is still there, but it's based on the highest individual rate. So we'll see that when you look at it, the highest individual rate at 8.99%, when you include the personal property replacement tax, that means corporate rates can go up to north of 15%. There we go. Okay. So I think we actually covered this here. So these are the states again. They go back. Here's what it is. Am I going backwards? There we go. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to put that down. And we'll race through it so you're not, your knees don't get too sore here. So the flat tax is definitely proven has been a way to hold down tax increases because we're either all in or we're all out, right? So with these two exceptions here, this is the end of the budget battle. This is the Quinn tax increases here. But if you look all the way down, how stable tax rates have been. So we think it's an important tax protection here, and it's changed recently here, but look at all those years where it was very stable. So here's our notion is that progressive tax is all about opening the door to future tax hikes, no doubt about it. So a reminder, again, November 3rd, all of us are going to be able to decide whether we're going to make this constitutional change or not. It's going to be a vote. 25% of Illinoisans know it's even on there. So when we come forward with the Farm Bureau, with lots of other groups, and hopefully even Joliet Chamber, which I'm sure I'll finish with a request for you to consider, is that we've got to go ahead and educate the public in why this is not the easiest thing, which says we want to spend more money and we're going to make those people over there pay it. What we're going to see is that everybody, almost everybody, ends up paying more in the future. So this is just the current language. This again, we covered this. Flat rate, only one tax based on income, 8-to-5 ratio, which again has been completely, we think, gutted by the constitutional amendment. Anything? I think we'll just kind of race through that one. So this is the plan that Pritzker and the Democrats have already passed. So it's a two-step process. Right now, they put the constitutional amendment on, and we're all going to vote on that and decide whether it passes or not. They passed legislation, however, that says if the constitutional amendment does pass, then these are going to be the new rates, and this is going to be our new tax structure. So you can, I'll point out that this is where the proponents really want to talk about how they're going to buy you a cup of coffee a month in tax savings if you're in this area here. It's a very small amount of savings, but that's where they come up with the number of people they're going to see a tax decrease. It is dollars, almost single-digit dollars in savings. But you look all the way down here, you can find out, hopefully you guys can see and see where you are in this range. Even by the time you get to 250, which depending where in the state, you're raising a family, 250 doesn't make you feel real, real rich, but a huge increase from 4.95 to 7.75. But here's the thing, if you are successful, you're a car dealer. You're somebody who's working 7 days a week at 1871, trying to build a new tech conglomerate. You aspire to make $1 million. Believe me, that's why you're doing it. So here's the one thing that is unique about this. If you do hit that $1 million threshold, unlike with your federal tax returns where all the dollars that lead up to $1 million are taxed at these rates, $1 gets taxed at the highest rate. No one does that. No one does that. So if you make $1,001,001, the very first dollar of your income is taxed at the highest rate. If you make $999,000, then those earlier dollars are taxed at the lower rates. Consequently, it's your tax burden is diminished. So this is incredibly punitive. And if you know anybody that makes $1 million, we all want to make $1 million. Where do you think they're going to take their money and possibly their business and their families? Yeah. So this is really important. Those rates are set in statute, not in the Constitution. They can change at any time. And it's what you'll see, I think, on the next slide. We get into the fact that I think the Democrats really made a mistake here. Colorado is a state we're looking at where it's been defeated 3 times in a row, kind of a millionaire's tax type of thing. They tied it directly to education. Bill Gates came in, Zuckerberg came in, spent a lot of money trying to pass it, and they failed 3 times in a row, and that was tied to education. This is nothing but a bag full of cash left at the legislature's doorstep. They can spend it on anything they want. No required property tax relief, no required public education spending, no required pension debt. Just, here's $3.6 billion, do whatever you want with it. If you're comfortable with that, with this legislature and this state government, okay, then you're shrugging your shoulders. Most Illinoisans, and according to our polling, say this is probably the single biggest thing that just upsets them, that we're just giving this state legislature, this governor, a bag full of cash, and with no requirements of what they spend it on. Now they'll talk about property tax relief, and I guarantee you they're definitely going to talk about property tax relief, talk about education spending, but in a subsequent slide you'll see that there's not enough money to do any of that in a significant way. So myths versus facts, and we will try and wrap up here quickly so we have time for questions. So the first one is that the progressive tax fixes Illinois' fiscal problems. So again, the governor, I like the governor. He's a very smart man, but his policies and what he knows as a business person don't always line up, in my opinion. So this is what the plan that we just saw with those rates, $3.6 billion. That's what they say they're going to generate. Well, let's, before you go ahead and accept that the governor's contention that progressive tax is how we get out from our fiscal problems, consider these numbers. Liberal groups say there's a $7.5 billion structural deficit that we're not spending. We're spending $7.5 billion less than we really need to address all the state's needs. And those are the kind of progressive groups that the governor has been listening to. So you're already less than half of what the structural deficit is. The backlog of unpaid bills, yeah, it's down from $13 billion. It's still $6.8 billion. Pension increases next year alone, year over year, another $1 billion. And then a reminder, it's about 138, I think now, of unfunded state pension liability. How is $3.6 billion going to go ahead and address those problems? So this is where we get to. Graphical representation is not a basketball. So only the myth is the wealthy will pay more. So remember the last slide? All those billions of dollars. All those billions of dollars are supposed to be taken care of by this sliver of all taxpayers. That's the percentage that is the wealthy that are going to pay at the top rate. This sliver, 60,000 taxpayers are supposed to handle all those billions of dollars for everybody else. Now there's some increases in here in this area, but everybody else. Are you willing to buy that? I'm not willing to buy that. So, so here is the example of what happened in Connecticut when they went down this same road. So Connecticut, blue state, East Coast, but we're a pretty blue state as well. So this is what happened. So let's start over here. We'll just go with the single and married five separately. So this is when they started this process. Again, we would say effective tax rate. Everybody paid 5% except unless you made less than $10,000. Effective flat rate. millionaire's tax comes in, or taxing the wealthy, so the rate goes up to 6.5% on 500,000 and above. If you're down here, which is most people were, you're saying, maybe that's okay. There wasn't nearly enough money. They had to come back just 2 years later and take the rate increase all the way down to $50,000. So went from tax the wealthy, millionaire's tax, to a tax increase on $50,000 because there just isn't the money at the top. And then they came back again 4 years later. They didn't take it down any farther, but all these rates up here jacked up as well. So you went from effectively one flat rate in 2008. 7 years later, you now get 7 brackets of increasing income tax rates. So we think that that is very that illustrates what's going to happen. We're repeating this a little bit. Myth 3, progressive income tax. It's going to help all these other areas. There's no guarantee whatsoever. They could just decide to go ahead and spend it on another remodel of the state house, whatever the heck they want to do. There's no guarantee in that amendment on what they have to spend the money on. This is a repeat section. We can go by this, but again, this is another way to illustrate the point. Illinois is very much in the mainstream of other states having flat tax or no income tax whatsoever. And this is what I alluded to before. So this is the percentage, the gray is the percentage of income that people, of all of the tax income that comes in, this is the percentage, and then this is the tax that they pay, income here. So you can see, I'm sorry, it's actually the other way around. So the top quintile, or the 500,000 and above, they get 22.7% of the total income in the state. High number, we know that, but they pay more than that of their share in income taxes. Down here, lowest quintile, yes, low wage earners, we get 3.7% of total income, but because of things like the earned income tax credit, they actually pay less than that flat tax. In the middle, it's remarkably accurate as opposed to, the flat tax works the way it's supposed to. And I think that is it. So hopefully I left some time for questions. And hopefully it made sense. For some of you really rolled that out. There's a lot of information there. Like I said, the other side has all their cards on the table, but it's really easy to say, we want to spend more money, make those people pay. We've got to go ahead and get this information out, which is more complicated, but it's, I think, more compelling if you can get people to wrap their minds around it. So if you've got thoughts about what you thought was the most compelling slide or the most compelling argument, please let me know. We're very much at the front end. We hope to do dozens of these presentations across the state to get the word out. And hopefully you'll help us get better and better at it. So with that, I will stop and ask for questions. Yeah.
Okay, so $3.5 billion. If everybody agreed that we needed $3.5 billion, we would spend it on pensions, spend it on education, spend it on earmarked acceptable items. How much would we need to raise the flat tax to generate another $3.5 billion?
That is noble. I do not know that number off the top of my head. So rather than guess at it, let me circle back at you. There's a general, you know what, I should know that off the top of my head, I do not. But it would take a tax increase, and we're often asked, well, if not this, then what? Right. And I would tell you that without spending reforms, you can't tax your way out of this. There's no doubt about it. You've got to get really, really serious. Take another look at pensions. Take another look at local tax, property taxes. Because then you can dedicate, if you really do something aggressive on local pensions, then you can dedicate some of that money to property tax relief. And I think we'd be for that. There's no doubt about it. But right now, it's simply a tax answer, and we've got to reject that. We've got to have a much more comprehensive discussion about how you actually figure yourself out of this. If you're really showing real fiscal restraints, and I don't know, Moody's and S&P probably don't want to hear me say this, that ramp that Edgar put in place, I'm not an Edgar fan, but he definitely backloaded that pension ramp, which is the amount of money the state's got to go ahead and continually put into the state pension fund. You're probably going to have to take a look at that. But without real other fiscal reforms, without everybody paying in and not just saying, make those people pay for things I want, we're not gonna do that. That's why this has to be.
So the rates that you showed in Connecticut, where they stepped up over 2 years and then again in another 3 years after that, what is the thought around what Illinois would have to do to really make this effective and work? They don't know.
There are a lot of variables. It's just you don't know. If in Connecticut, they essentially just says, well, we need more revenue, so let's just keep jacking up taxes. We would like to think that our policymakers in Springfield would get reforms. There's some real fiscal management. Medicaid would still be, I think, cost constrained more than they have been. Things like that. But for now, for Connecticut, it was just jack up the rates and not have any real kind of spending reform. We would hope that in Illinois it would be a combination. I can't tell you that we wouldn't see some kind of tax increase, even if this is defeated, but it's got to be a holistic approach, not just we're going to go ahead and gouge taxpayers and essentially fib to them that, oh, you're not going to pay more. You will be paying more. No matter how.
On the information side, the presentation that you just did, is that something that you will share at some point?
We're giving it to everybody. This is the first time I've done this one, and I'll learn the clicker better next time. Yeah, we're looking for feedback. This is probably going to change 17 times because there's all sorts of information that we can talk about. We didn't really touch on the political side of this thing. In Connecticut, the first two efforts where the proponents tried to pass it, they outspent the opponents 6-7 to 1, and still lost. There's a whole nother story to tell about you all can make a real difference. If you're willing to talk neighbor to neighbor, colleague to colleague, taxpayer to taxpayer, that's where we're going to be focused, and that's where I think the chamber network is so important, is that it is, when you're after hours, I won't make you commit to it today, but, that's what you should be saying. Did you know that there is 60,000 people are supposed to solve billions of dollars of problems for the entire state of Illinois? Do you think that's going to happen? Or are they coming for you next? They're coming for you. I went a little long. I apologize. I'm at 1:03. I always like to end a little early, but depending on what you want, I can take more questions now, or I can just hang out for a little while. So if you want to ask questions, but it's Illinois Chamber. We always end on time, and 3 minutes late. I think. So.